in hand. They weren't fighting over politics or power. They were dueling over a dessert. A pie so luxurious, so rare and so personal that one man was willing to die for it. This is the story of a fatal recipe. A tale of stolen pride, almonds and blood on the cobblestones. The man who started it all was Lord Algernon Blackstone, a lover of French cuisine and rumoured to be obsessed with perfecting a single dish. An almond tart with a honey glaze scented with citrus and rose. He served it at a private dinner for a royal envoy. And the pie was the star of the night. But among the guests was Sir Geoffrey Hale, a rival noble known for his own culinary ambitions. Days later, the exact same pie appeared at a banquet thrown by Sir Geoffrey. Same crust, same fragrance, same garnished almonds, arranged in a perfect spiral. Lord Algernon was enraged. He accused Geoffrey publicly of stealing the recipe. Tempers flared, insults flew, and the only proper course of action for gentlemen of the time was a duel. At sunrise, they met in Hyde Park. Witnesses say Algernon fired first and missed. Geoffrey's shot struck true. Algernon fell. Geoffrey lived, and the pie lived on with him. Now, centuries later, we can bring it back. Let's make the almond pie that sparked a noble feud. Start with one pie crust, either puff pastry or buttery short crust. In a bowl, combine 1 cup of almond flour, half a cup of sugar and half a cup of softened butter. Blend until creamy. Add 2 eggs, the zest of 1 lemon and a teaspoon of rose water. If you want a deeper flavor, add a pinch of clove or cinnamon. Mix it all until smooth and fragrant. Pour the filling into your pie crust and spread it evenly. Bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 Celsius for about 30 to 35 minutes until golden on top. Let it cool, and if you're feeling fancy dust, with a little powdered sugar. Take a bite and you'll taste why this dish was worth fighting for. It's soft but rich, floral and nutty with a light citrus lift. You get the sense that this was more than dessert. It was status, it was skill. It was pride on a plate. The pie didn't just end a life, it created a legacy. And now you've brought that taste of history back to life. If you enjoyed this story and want to taste more of the past, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who'd duel over dessert. This is Tasting History, where every bite tells a story.
China's story begins over 5,000 years ago along the Yellow River. The Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties laid the roots of civilization with bronze tools, ancestor worship, and written characters. They believed rulers held a divine right called the Mandate of Heaven. It could be revoked through corruption or failure. The Zhou dynasty saw the birth of Confucianism and Taoism. These philosophies still influence Chinese society today. The Qin dynasty rose through violence and unity. Emperor Qin Shi Huang conquered rival states, burned books, and buried scholars alive. He forced millions to build roads, canals, and the First Great Wall. His tomb still holds the silent army of terracotta warriors. The Han dynasty brought stability, expansion, and glory. Silk flowed west to Rome, paper was invented, and Confucianism became law. Yet rebellion and famine eventually ended the Han's golden age. China shattered into chaos once again. The Three Kingdoms period followed and became legendary in Chinese folklore. It was a time of endless war and heroic generals. The Tang dynasty became a cultural superpower. Poetry and cosmopolitanism thrived as China reached new heights. China's capital, Chang'an, became one of the largest and most advanced cities on Earth. Foreign traders and scholars came from across Asia and the Middle East. The Song dynasty followed with inventions like gunpowder and printing presses. They created the first government-issued paper money in history. Their navy was advanced and powerful, but political weakness invited invasion. In the 1200s, the Mongols stormed across the steppes. Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, conquered
made a
China
mistake.
and founded
27
the Yuan
years
dynasty.
ago, he met a crow. He called
Trade expanded across Asia and Europe, but Mongol rule brought heavy taxes and deep resentment. The Ming dynasty rose in rebellion and restored Chinese rule. They rebuilt the Great Wall and sent Admiral Zheng He's fleets across the oceans. His ships reached India, Arabia, and East Africa. They were larger than any European fleet at the time. Then they turned inward out of fear of foreign influence. Isolation and corruption weakened the state from within. The Qing dynasty emerged from Manchuria and conquered Beijing. They expanded China to its greatest size, including Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Taiwan. The empire ruled over many ethnic groups. Han Chinese, Manchus, Mongols, Tibetans, and Muslims all lived under Qing control. By the 1800s, the empire stagnated. The West forced China open through war and opium. The Opium Wars with Britain shattered Chinese sovereignty. Western powers carved spheres of influence and took Hong Kong. Millions became addicted to British opium. The Chinese emperor's pleas were ignored. The Qing tried to reform but failed. The Boxer Rebellion was crushed by foreign armies. In 1911, revolution ended 2,000 years of imperial rule. The Republic of China was declared under Sun Yat-sen. But democracy collapsed into warlord chaos. Out of this storm emerged the nationalists and the communists. Japan invaded China in the 1930s. The Nanjing Massacre left hundreds of thousands dead. Civilians were slaughtered and women were raped. Entire districts were destroyed. Nationalists and communists briefly united to fight Japan, but once the war ended, civil war resumed. In 1949, Mao Zedong's communists seized Beijing. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. Two Chinas were born. Both claimed to be the real government. Mao launched the Great Leap Forward to modernize agriculture and industry. Instead, it caused the deadliest famine in human history. Up to 45 million people starved to death. Some villages turned to cannibalism in desperation. To tighten control, Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution. Red Guards destroyed temples and turned children against teachers and parents. Universities closed for years. Ancient knowledge was lost or rewritten. Mao died in 1976, and Deng Xiaoping took power. He opened the economy while keeping the Communist Party in control. Factories boomed and poverty dropped. China's coastal cities became engines of growth. But political freedom never arrived. The party's grip remained firm. In 1989, students filled Tiananmen Square demanding democracy. For days, they protested peacefully beneath a statue of the goddess of democracy. Then the tanks came. Soldiers opened fire on the crowds. The true death toll is unknown. One man stood before a tank and became a symbol around the world. Inside China, the massacre is erased. Searching Tiananmen or Tank Man is blocked. China's digital firewall bans Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. The state monitors every post and every phone. Millions use government-run apps that track movement and conversations. Social credit scores affect travel and employment. Meanwhile, Taiwan flourished into a thriving democracy. It holds elections, issues passports, and controls its own military. China still claims Taiwan as a breakaway province. It vows to retake the island by force if necessary. In the South China Sea, China built military bases on artificial islands. It claimed almost the entire region using the 9-dash line. International courts ruled the claim invalid. China refused to back down. Its ships confront Vietnamese and Filipino vessels regularly. Tensions with the United States continue to rise. In Xinjiang, over 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been detained. Reports describe forced labor, brainwashing, and sterilization. Mosques have been demolished. Children are separated from families and sent to state-run boarding schools. The government calls it counterterrorism. Critics call it cultural genocide. Tibet remains under tight control. The Dalai Lama lives in exile and protests are brutally crushed. Religious practices are tightly monitored. Foreign journalists are rarely allowed in. In Hong Kong, protests erupted in 2019 against a new extradition law. China responded with mass arrests and national security crackdowns. Pro-democracy activists have been silenced or exiled. Newspapers have been shut down or censored. The one country, two systems promise is gone. Hong Kong's freedoms are fading fast. Despite controversy, China is rising fast. It leads in AI infrastructure and global influence. The Belt and Road Initiative builds railways, ports, and highways around the world. Some fear it traps nations in debt and dependency. At home, China faces growing pressure. Youth unemployment is rising and censorship tightens. Nationalism is high, but so is unrest. The future remains uncertain. Will China become the world's dominant superpower, or will its internal contradictions bring it down? China's past is vast and violent. Its future could reshape the entire world. Like if you learned something, subscribe to see more. Share to support the channel.
The American Civil War. A brutal conflict that shaped the soul of a nation. This is the story of how the United States of America tore itself apart, and what it took to stitch itself back together. It is a war still misunderstood, still debated, and still alive in the conscience of a country it nearly destroyed. This war was not inevitable, but it was years in the making. It was not simply North against South. It was economy against economy, future against past, and freedom against bondage. Slavery had become the spine of the Southern economy. It was embedded in every law, every institution. Millions of black men, women, and children were considered property. They had no rights, no voice, no protection. Meanwhile, the North was changing rapidly. Factories were rising. Immigrants were pouring in. Cities were growing. There were still racists in the North. But the North did not depend on slavery to survive. And more people were calling for its end. Laws tried to calm the storm. The Missouri Compromise admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as free. The Compromise of 1850 included the Fugitive Slave Act, angering many in the North. The Kansas-Nebraska Act opened new lands to slavery by popular vote. Bleeding Kansas erupted in violence.
The Ice Age was like nature's way of saying, hope you like snow.
Compromise was failing. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision declared that no black person could ever be a citizen. That decision struck like thunder. It confirmed to millions that the system was deeply corrupted. Then came John Brown, an abolitionist who believed slavery would only end through bloodshed. In 1859, he led a raid on a federal armory at Harper's Ferry. He wanted to spark a slave revolt. He failed and was executed. But in death, he became a symbol. A martyr to abolitionists, a terrorist to the South. The election of 1860 was the final fracture. Abraham Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state. The South panicked. They believed Lincoln would abolish slavery outright. South Carolina was the first to leave the Union. 10 more states followed. In early 1861, they formed the Confederate States of America. They elected Jefferson Davis as their president. and they began seizing federal property within their borders. Then came Fort Sumter, a Union fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate forces surrounded it and demanded surrender. When the Union refused, they opened fire. The American Civil War had begun. Many believed the war would last weeks. Instead, it lasted 4 years. It became a grinding, bitter, and costly struggle. At the First Battle of Bull Run, Union troops panicked and fled. It was a wake-up call. The South would not be easily defeated. At Antietam, over 23,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in a single day. It remains the bloodiest day in American history. The dead lay in rows, unburied, untouched. The scale of death was staggering. Gettysburg saw 3 days of fighting and over 50,000 casualties. It marked the high water mark of the Confederacy. After Gettysburg, the South would never again launch a major offensive in the North. In the West, Union forces captured New Orleans and took control of the Mississippi River. General Ulysses S. Grant laid siege to Vicksburg and starved the city into surrender. This cut the Confederacy in half. General William Tecumseh Sherman then began his march to the sea. He destroyed railroads, burned crops, and tore through Georgia. He practiced total war, aiming to break the South's ability and will to fight. Meanwhile, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were free. It did not immediately end slavery, but it changed the purpose of the war. Now the Union fought not only for survival, but for freedom. Black men rushed to enlist. Over 180,000 served in the Union Army. They fought with courage. They faced death not only from bullets, but from execution or re-enslavement if captured.
The earth basks in the sun's
Yet
light.
they fought.
But not all parts are treated equally.
For their people. For dignity. For the future. The Confederacy hoped for help from Europe. They believed cotton would bring them allies. But after the Emancipation Proclamation, Britain and France stepped back. They would not support a war for slavery. The war continued to drag on. The South's resources dried up. Its men were exhausted. Grant pushed forward with relentless pressure. He understood that victory would come not just through strategy, but through attrition. In 1865, Union forces captured Richmond, the Confederate capital. Robert E. Lee tried to escape west, but his army was surrounded. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse, he surrendered to Grant. Just 5 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, shot in the back of the head at Ford's Theater. He did not live to see the peace he had fought for. The South lay in ruins. Cities were burned. Fields left fallow. Millions of people were dead, wounded, orphaned, or traumatized. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. But freedom did not bring equality. Racism remained deeply rooted. Reconstruction began, but it was slow, violent, and fiercely resisted. 1 in every 4 Southern white men of military age had died. Entire communities were wiped out. Tens of thousands of men returned home with missing limbs. Many were never whole again, in body or mind. And the country remained deeply divided. The American Civil War ended on paper, but its consequences are still unfolding. This war forced America to reckon with its original sin. It tore off the mask. It exposed every contradiction. And it demanded that the country choose what it truly believed in. The cost was staggering. But the future was bought with that price. Not all battles are fought with guns, and not all wounds are visible. This was the war that forged modern America, and the memory of it must never fade. Please like, share, and subscribe if you believe in telling the truth behind history. This is the American Civil War, and this is the story that must be remembered. In the beginning, there were no borders, no passports, no races, no languages, just people. Homo sapiens. One species, one ancient family. Born not in a country, but in the cradle of East Africa. 200,000 years ago. They walked upright. They hunted. They loved. They feared the dark. They looked to the stars, even if they did not have words for them. But the earth is vast, and humans wander. They migrated north. They chased game. They chased seasons. They crossed deserts. Throughout history, war has taken many forms. But perhaps no kind of battle tests the human spirit more than a siege. Trapped within walls, cut off from food, hope, and reinforcements. A siege is not just a battle of
Dinosaurs
weapons.
once ruled the
It is a
world for
battle
hundreds of
patience,
millions of years,
fear, and
towering,
survival.
thundering.
These are the greatest sieges in history. The Siege of Troy, the Greeks versus the Trojans. It began with the abduction of Helen, and it lasted 10 years. The Greeks laid siege to Troy in a campaign filled with duels, deception, and death. Legends say it ended with the famous Trojan horse, a gift left at the city gates, hiding Greek soldiers within. When night fell, Troy was betrayed from the inside and burned to the ground. The Siege of Babylon, the Persians versus the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great of Persia faced one of the most fortified cities in the world. Babylon's walls were tall, wide, and guarded by the Euphrates River. But Cyrus diverted the river and marched his army through the dry bed at night. The city fell without a fight. It was one of the most brilliant siege tactics in ancient history. The Siege of Syracuse, the Greeks and Carthage combined versus the Roman Republic. During the Second Punic War, the Roman Republic attacked the Greek city of Syracuse. But the defenders had a secret weapon, Archimedes. The great inventor created catapults, mirrors, and defensive machines to hold off the Romans for nearly 2 years. Eventually, the city fell, and Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier, despite orders to keep him alive. The Siege of Masada, Zealots versus the Roman Empire. In the deserts of Judea, a group of Jewish rebels held out against the Roman Empire atop a desert plateau. The Romans built a massive ramp over months to breach the fortress.
Love is
But
patient.
when they arrived, they
Love is
found
kind.
silence.
It does not envy.
Nearly 1,000 defenders had taken their own lives rather than be captured. It remains one of the most haunting sieges in history. The Siege of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire versus Persians. The capital of the Byzantine Empire was tested more than once. In 717, it held firm against Arab forces. But in 1453, it faced the full force of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II brought cannons, including the massive bombard that shattered the Theodosian walls. After 53 days, Constantinople fell. The city became Istanbul, and the medieval era came to an end. The Siege of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs versus the Spanish conquistadors. In the heart of modern-day Mexico, Hernán Cortés led Spanish forces against the Aztec capital. With the help of native allies and aided by disease, the Spanish laid siege to the island city. The canals turned red. Famine and smallpox ravaged the defenders. After 93 days, the Aztec Empire collapsed. The Siege of Vienna, Austrians versus the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire reached the gates of Europe's core. Vienna was surrounded. But a massive relief force led by Polish King Jan Sobieski launched the largest cavalry charge in history. The siege was broken. It marked the high water mark of Ottoman expansion into Europe. The Siege of Leningrad, Nazi Germany versus the Russians. Nazi Germany surrounded the Soviet city of Leningrad for nearly 900 days. In the freezing cold, over 1 million civilians died from starvation, shelling, and disease. Yet the city never surrendered. It was one of the longest and most tragic sieges in modern warfare. The Siege of Stalingrad, Nazi Germany versus Russians. Stalingrad wasn't a siege by walls, but by sheer destruction. Germany's Sixth Army pushed deep into the Soviet Union. But Soviet forces refused to break. Urban warfare took over, room by room, floor by floor. Eventually, Germany's army was surrounded and forced to surrender. It was the turning point of World War II. The Siege of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnamese versus the French. In the jungles of Vietnam, French forces set up a base at Dien Bien Phu.
Earth's core is hotter than the surface of the sun.
They believed
but it's been burning for over 4.5 billion.
Surrounded them in the hills and brought in heavy artillery. After 57 days, the French surrendered. It marked the end of French colonial rule in Indochina and the rise of the Vietnam War. The Siege of Sarajevo, Bosnia Civil War. In the Bosnian War, the capital city of Sarajevo was trapped for almost 4 years. Snipers targeted civilians. Artillery rained down on homes, schools, and hospitals. More than 10,000 people died, many of them children. It was the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Sieges are not always won by force. Sometimes they are won by will, by the refusal to surrender, by hope that holds out even when the walls begin to crumble. From ancient stone cities to modern skylines, sieges have shaped the course of human history. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to see future content. Sharing is caring. Once upon a time in old Europe, people started dying mysteriously and in large numbers, and the explanation, according to many, was not disease or bad sanitation. It was vampires. Yes, vampires. Dead people rising from the grave, sneaking into homes, and draining the life from their neighbors. This wasn't just folklore whispered around campfires. Entire villages believed it. So did nobles, priests, and even doctors. Everybody out here yelling, "Occupy Mars!" like pale skin, weight loss, coughing up blood. Today we call that tuberculosis. Back then it was textbook vampire behavior. So what did they do about it? They grabbed shovels, marched to the graveyards, and started digging people up. Once they opened a coffin, the body was judged on appearance. If it wasn't decomposing fast enough, that meant it was undead. Sometimes the stomach was bloated or there was blood at the mouth. Instead of realizing that these were normal signs of decomposition, they assumed the corpse had been feeding. So they acted. They removed hearts, cut off heads, drove stakes through chests, shoved garlic in mouths, and occasionally they poured boiling wine over.
In the final days of
The Wild West was. They don't teach this in school.
before man, before cities,
They called them savages.
the sun rises over Rome.
They say I was born with cherry blossoms in my hair. My name is Akiko. Daughter of Lord Katsuro. Samurai. Warrior. Father. To the world he is a blade. To me he is a storm. Every morning, I wake before the sun kisses the mountains. My feet touch the floor with reverence. My breath becomes a prayer. Before the world demands anything of me, I reclaim silence.
They traveled light years, crossed galaxies, bent
I do not choose my clothing. I do not choose my meals. I do not choose my fate. But I have learned to master the spaces in between. The pauses. The looks. The things not said. The boys train with swords in the courtyard below. Their grunts echo like war drums. I watch from behind the paper screen, still invisible. They sweat. They bleed. When I was 10, I picked up a bokken and laughed. Father saw me, and the laughter died. He said, "Your hands are for teacups, not blood." But what of my heart, Father? What of my fire? At mid-morning, I walk the gardens with Lady Hana. We speak of cherry blossoms, marriages, the weather. I nod. I smile. They called her a widow, but she became something far more dangerous. I dream of forests, of wind, of running so far no one can find me. And sometimes, I dream of him. The first time I saw him, he was sharpening his blade by the shrine. Torn robes. Old scars. No master. A Ronin. Father says they are shame-made flesh. But shame has never looked so human. He bowed, not as a servant, but as a man. And in that small moment, something ancient passed between us. Not love. Not yet. But recognition. At night, I write letters I will never send. To him. To the girl I am not allowed to be. To the gods who no longer answer. My mother's fan rests by my bed. Delicate.
Every morning, a man and his
Beautiful.
dog walked side by side to the train station.
Breakable. Just like she was. Dinner is served on silence. Father sits at the head of the table, his eyes heavy with disappointment he never voices. The servants glide like ghosts. I do not speak unless spoken to. I chew the rice and swallow the sorrow. But tonight, I sneak out. Soft steps. No sound. I meet him in the temple garden. And for the first time, someone looks at me like I am not property. He speaks of the northern provinces, of honor lost and found. I speak of duty in cages. He touches my hand and I don't pull away. Just for tonight, I am not Akiko the daughter.
In a world where global powers rise and fall, one nation continues to cast a shadow across land, sea, air, space, and beyond. The United States of America commands the single most powerful military force the world has ever seen. In 2024, America's
They
defense
didn't
budget
ride for
reached
glory. They rode for
$997 billion.
survival. In the dust
That's
and
more
blood
than the
of the
combined
American
military spending of China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, the UK, Germany, France, Japan, and South Korea combined. Nearly 40% of the entire planet's military budget belongs to the United States. This isn't just national defense, it's global dominance. Across the globe, the U.S. operates more than 750 military bases in over 80 countries. From Germany to Japan, from Guam to Djibouti, American boots, aircraft, and missile systems are already in place. These aren't symbolic outposts. These are real command centers, launch pads, hangars, war-ready installations capable of rapid response, surveillance, or full-scale conflict at a moment's notice. At sea, the U.S. Navy is unmatched. 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers serve as floating fortresses, each carrying up to 80 aircraft. No other nation has more than 2. Alongside them sail 9 amphibious assault ships, 92 guided missile destroyers, and a submarine fleet that can disappear beneath the ocean's surface and reappear anywhere in the world. In the skies, America rules with over 13,000 military aircraft. That includes over 1,800 fighter jets and more than 700 aerial tankers, giving U.S. forces the power to strike, refuel, and continue missions long after others would need to retreat. The F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II don't just dominate the air, They render enemy radar systems nearly useless. On land, the scale is equally overwhelming. 4,640 tanks, over 1,800 pieces of towed artillery, hundreds of rocket launcher systems, and more than 390,000 ground vehicles that range from armored troop carriers to advanced mobile command stations. Behind this machinery stands an army of over 1.3 million active duty personnel. Add another 800,000 in reserves. That's over 2 million trained warriors at the ready. Each soldier, sailor, airman, and marine is backed by the most sophisticated logistics network ever created, with weapons, gear, drones, satellites, fuel, and rations moving with machine-like precision across continents. And this isn't just about tanks and jets. The U.S. is investing heavily in future warfare, in space, cyberspace, and artificial intelligence. The newly activated U.S. Space Force monitors threats in orbit. Billions are being poured into space-based missile defense, satellite jamming technology, and next-generation communication networks. Cyber Command, operating in digital shadows, defends against intrusions and launches its own attacks, with tools as devastating as any missile. In comparison, China spends around $296 billion on its military. Russia? Just over $100 billion. And their global presence? A fraction of the reach America commands. Let's talk bullets. The U.S. produces and maintains over 2 billion rounds of small arms ammunition annually. Over 90,000 jet engines are in active service or reserve. Tens of thousands of drones patrol the skies. Surveillance drones, combat drones, reconnaissance systems, each with lethal efficiency. Then there's nuclear. The U.S. has around 5,244 nuclear warheads. Submarines, bombers, and intercontinental ballistic missiles stand ready with second strike capability. A deterrent so powerful, it has defined global politics for generations. And when war breaks out, the U.S. can respond with overwhelming force in under 72 hours, anywhere on Earth. Aircraft carriers deploy. Submarines vanish. Drones launch. Cyber teams activate. A global response unfolds like clockwork. This isn't just military strength. It's engineered supremacy, a layered defense, a global strike force. A machine built for any war, anywhere, anytime. And it's not slowing down. With new generations of hypersonic missiles, AI-driven battle systems, and robotic armor already in development, America's war machine is evolving. From deep ocean trenches to orbital space, from deserts to city streets, the reach is total. The message is clear. No nation can match it. No alliance can outspend it. And no threat can be ignored by it. This is the true scale of American military power. A force without equal. A reach without borders. A future defined by dominance. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to our channel for more epic breakdowns of the powers shaping our world. And hit the bell, because what comes next, you won't want to miss. Before borders or bullets, this land thrived under the care of its First Nations. Over 500 tribes with more than 300 languages lived across the continent. From the towering pines of the Pacific Northwest to the sun-scorched mesas of the Southwest. Peace wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It was a world of sacred rivers, sky dances, buffalo migrations, and unwritten laws held in honor. A civilization far older than the nation that would come to claim it. Then came ships, steel, and handshakes laced with betrayal. Treaties were offered with smiles and signed with lies, written in ink that faded when convenient. The colonists came preaching peace and brotherhood until they came with guns. What began with trade turned to bloodshed. The government carved up the land not with permission, but with force. And when paper wasn't enough, they used fire and fear to finish the job. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre shocked even hardened warriors. Cheyenne women and children were slaughtered as they waved white flags under a U.S. military promise of peace. It was called a victory by the newspapers. A cleansing. But to those who watched their families die, it was something else. The first death knell of 1,000 broken promises. The ghost dance came later, a desperate prayer, a sacred ritual meant to bring back the ancestors and return the land to balance. But Washington feared the rhythm of those drums.
Rambo was fiction.
In 1890, at Wounded Knee, they answered with bullets instead of understanding. More than 250 Lakota were gunned down. The dead included women, children, and old men. Their bodies frozen in the snow were the final images of a century-long betrayal. And yet, even within confinement, love endured. Behind barbed wire and broken promises, a Sioux warrior fell in love with an Apache girl, a bond that defied tradition, distance, and the U.S. government's attempt to divide. Their love was rebellion. Their child, a silent protest against extinction. Then came the schools. Carlisle, Haskell, Calaco, kill the Indian, save the man, they said. Generations of native children were stripped of their names, their languages, their hair, and their souls. What genocide could not finish, forced assimilation tried to erase. These schools were not places of learning. They were graveyards for identity. Still, the warrior spirit refused to die. In 1876, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse led the Lakota and Cheyenne to victory at the Battle of Little Bighorn. General Custer fell, along with his arrogance. It was not just a battle. It was the last thunderclap of resistance in a storm that had raged for centuries. The government never forgave the tribes for winning that day. The history books rarely remember it. And what of the women? Buffalo Calf.
Rome. The name still echoes like a war drum across time. It began with blood. Romulus murdering his twin Remus. The first betrayal. The first throne. And from that moment forward, betrayal became tradition. Rome rose from dirt and ambition. It became an empire that devoured the world. But not through peace, through war, seduction, strategy, and shadow deals. The Roman legions didn't just conquer, they engineered dominance, roads that still exist, bridges stronger than modern steel, and war machines capable of crushing civilizations. But behind the armor were lives no history book dares to explore. While generals bathed in glory, slaves built the empires, cleaned the wounds, and shared the beds. The Roman war machine ran on a code, discipline, honor, sacrifice. Yet its greatest victories came from merciless efficiency. Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul led to over 1 million deaths and hundreds of thousands enslaved. When Vercingetorix, the great Gallic chieftain, surrendered, Caesar kept him in chains for 5 years before executing him in a Roman parade. That was mercy in Rome. Then came the Civil War, Caesar versus Pompey. Rome bled itself dry. The streets of Pharsalus flowed with Roman blood. Families turned on each other. Wives sent messages to assassins. Brothers fought in opposite legions. It was civil war in name only. It was slaughter for control. After Caesar's murder, the chaos didn't end. It simply shifted. Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Octavian. Love became a war tactic. Cleopatra seduced 2 Roman titans and nearly conquered Rome through silk and seduction. She bore Caesar a son. She made Antony abandon his duty. And when it all collapsed, they chose death over submission. The Battle of Actium ended it. Roman ships turned the sea red. Cleopatra's fleet burned, and her empire with it. Octavian became Augustus, the first true emperor. He created peace by destroying everyone who opposed him. That's what Rome called the Pax Romana, peace through absolute power. The emperors that followed were gods in flesh, or demons in disguise. Tiberius executed anyone who whispered against him. He filled his palace with treasures and things that cannot be discussed on YouTube. Caligula turned the palace into a brothel, named his horse a priest, ordered soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war. Nero played the lyre while Rome burned. But he also built golden palaces and used Christian slaves as torches to light his gardens. Still, they were worshipped because in Rome image
They
was
say
everything.
heaven has streets
They
of
called
gold.
it virtus,
But that's
virtue,
just the beginning.
But real Roman virtue
According
meant
to
power,
ancient
fear,
texts,
and legacy.
there's a
Every
city
war
made
was
of
recorded.
crystal.
Every kiss between enemies remembered. Every betrayal carved in marble. Love and loyalty were commodities, bought, traded, and sometimes destroyed. The Vestal virgins were supposed to remain pure, but one, named Licinia, fell in love with a consul. When discovered, she was buried alive. He was exiled. Their affair nearly triggered a riot. There were gladiators who loved noble women. One, a Thracian fighter named Spartacus, became a legend. He didn't just fight, he led a revolt of 70,000 slaves. Rome trembled. It took Crassus, one of the richest men in history, to defeat him. When Spartacus fell, 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, a road lined with corpses for miles. A warning carved in flesh. Rome's power stretched from Britain to Syria. They fought Persians, Germanic tribes, Numidians, Parthians, Egyptians, and they learned to use each of their enemies' strengths. And women. Roman generals often took lovers from conquered lands, not just for pleasure, but for intel, alliances, and control. Women like Boudica, queen of the Iceni in Britain, who rose after her daughters were violated. She led a rebellion that burned Roman cities to the ground. Rome nearly lost Britain. Or Zenobia of Palmyra, a queen who conquered Egypt and ruled as if she were a Roman herself. She spoke Latin, studied philosophy, and led armies. She was eventually paraded through Rome in chains. But her legend outlived the emperor who captured her. Women in Rome weren't powerless. They just played a different game. Livia poisoned rivals to make her son emperor. Agrippina seduced her own uncle Claudius and manipulated her way to becoming empress. She raised Nero, who later had her killed, fearing she was too powerful. Every family in Rome was a battlefield. Even love was a gamble of life or death. Some slaves who were loved were freed and became power players. Some lovers were set up as spies, and some romances, like that of Emperor Hadrian and Antinous, became divine legends. When Antinous drowned, Hadrian built statues across the empire. Cities bore his name. He became a god not for who he was, but for who loved him. Rome elevated love into legacy and weaponized it just as easily. But power corrupts, and emperors fell like dominoes.
Sharks are
Commodus
older
was
than
strangled in his
trees.
bath by a wrestler hired
Not
by his
just by a
mistress.
little, by
Caracalla was murdered while peeing on the side of a road. Elagabalus was hacked to death and thrown in the Tiber for his flamboyant rule and refusal to play Roman politics. Rome collapsed not in a single battle, but through decadence, betrayal, division, and arrogance. Invasions came, Huns, Goths, Vandals, but the empire was already dead in spirit, a corpse wrapped in gold. And still, Rome echoes. Its laws, its architecture, its betrayals. Every empire since has tried to imitate it. None have succeeded, because Rome was never just a city. It was an idea, a living god, a cult of ambition and seduction and blood. And behind its throne stood the forgotten, the slaves, the lovers, the warriors, the assassins. This is their story, Rome's real story. And now it's yours. If you're still watching, you know this isn't your average history lesson. You've just walked through the blood-soaked halls of power, love, and betrayal. You've seen Rome without the marble polish. So if you want more empires, more forbidden stories, more truths too bold for the classroom, then subscribe to the channel right now. Hit that like button and comment your favorite part of Rome's twisted legacy. In the spring of 1453, the greatest city in the world prepared to die. Constantinople, once the heart of the Roman Empire, now stood as a shining relic, surrounded by towering walls and fading prayers. Inside its churches, the faithful begged for salvation. Outside, the most powerful army the East had ever seen gathered under black banners and crescent moons. Sultan Mehmed II, barely 21, had come to carve his name into history, with gunpowder, steel, and blood. For centuries, the city had stood like a beacon, its golden domes and stone ramparts a symbol of civilization itself. Now it faced its final siege. But behind those walls, not all hearts beat in unison. The Byzantine court was fractured, broken by fear and whispers of betrayal. Among them was Helena Palaiologina, the emperor's niece, a diplomat, a poet, and secretly a spy. Helena had begun corresponding with a mysterious figure from the Ottoman side, Iskander al-Rumi, an elite commander raised in both Greek and Turkish lands. What started as messages of diplomacy turned into something dangerous. They wrote of peace, and then of dreams.
You thought The Last of Us
and
was
then
fiction?
Of each other. She saw a soldier who wanted more than conquest. He saw a woman willing to risk everything for something greater than either empire. The walls of Constantinople were ancient, but the weapons that faced them were not. Mehmed brought monstrous cannons, built by a Hungarian engineer, capable of smashing through stone once thought invincible. Day and night, the thunder echoed, and each morning, the defenders climbed bloodied ramparts to repel the next wave. Among them stood Giovanni Giustiniani, a famed Genoese mercenary commander hired to lead the defense. His armor gleamed, his tactics were ruthless, and his loyalty was for sale. Beside him fought his second-in-command, Alessandro Vero, a cold-eyed strategist with ambitions of his own. He watched Helena closely, not for protection, but for power. He had once loved her. Now he watched her drift toward Iskandar. And that could not be allowed. The siege raged for weeks. Ottoman ships, once blocked by chains across the harbor, were hauled overland and launched behind enemy lines. An act so bold, it broke the morale of many inside. Yet still the city held. Arrows fell like rain. Flames rose from towers. The cry of Allahu Akbar clashed with the pealing of Orthodox bells. Each night, Helena and Iskandar met in secret, their words exchanged by hidden riders or whispered across the shattered outer walls. Their love grew in the shadows of war, forbidden and fleeting. And above them, Alessandro plotted. On May 28th, with rations gone and morale crumbling, Emperor Constantine prepared for the final assault. He walked the streets in disguise that night, blessing his soldiers and weeping with his people. Some say he knew he would die. Others believe he hoped for a miracle. That same night, Helena vanished. Some believed she fled. Others claimed betrayal. In truth, Alessandro had followed her. He had found the meeting place, a ruined chapel near the outer gate, and waited. When Iskandar arrived, Alessandro struck first. Steel met steel. Helena screamed. They fought in silence as the stars burned overhead. Alessandro's blade cut deep, not into Iskandar, but into Helena, shielding the man she now loved. Iskandar roared, disarmed him, and nearly killed him, but couldn't. He fled into the night, carrying Helena's bleeding body in his arms. At dawn, Mehmed launched his final assault. The walls collapsed under cannon fire and sheer numbers.
They weren't just scared of vampires. They dug up graves to fight them.
Emperor Constantine charged into the breach with sword in hand and was never seen again. The city fell. Churches were looted. The great Hagia Sophia turned into a mosque. Blood ran through the streets where prayers had once echoed. Helena died that morning in a hidden room beneath the palace. Iskandar never found her again. Some say he buried her secretly in the Garden of Emperors. Others believe he fled the city forever, broken and dishonored. Alessandro was captured by the Ottomans. Rather than kill him, Mehmed spared his life, impressed by his cunning. But Alessandro lived with a scar on his cheek and a wound in his soul. Sultan Mehmed II rode through the city that day in silence. He ordered his men to stop the destruction. He walked alone through the Hagia Sophia, now echoing with chants in a new tongue. And there, beneath its dome, he whispered a verse from the Quran about the rise and fall of empires. The fall of Constantinople ended the last true chapter of the Roman Empire. It reshaped the world, cutting Europe off from the East, sparking exploration and changing religion, politics, and power forever. But it was also a story of two hearts that met on opposite sides of a war and burned with a love the world was never meant to witness. Knowledge is power. Like if you learned something, subscribe to see new content and share to support the channel.
They did not fight for glory. They fought for belief, a belief so strong it demanded sacrifice, secrecy, and silence. Long before the world spoke of ninjas, there were the Hashashin, the original assassins of the Middle East.
Saturn is the second biggest planet in our solar system.
In a fortress called Alamut, The old man of the mountain trained a legion of killers unlike anything the world had ever seen. Cloaked in mystery and sworn to death, they would become a nightmare whispered by kings, caliphs, and crusaders alike. At the heart of their legend was not just the blade, but the mind. The Hashashin were not butchers. They were surgeons of power. They would spend weeks, even years, studying a target. They would embed themselves as servants, scribes, merchants, even lovers. And then, when the moment struck, they would deliver their message with a single cut, often in public, always in silence. A message that no man, no matter how powerful, could hide from death. One of the earliest kills etched into history was the assassination of Nizam al-Mulk, the vizier of the mighty Seljuk Empire. He was cut down on the road by a man disguised as a wandering dervish. No shouts, no struggle, just steel and blood in the dust. But it would not end there. The Hashashin would strike again and again. Advisors, governors, warlords, even crusader commanders like Conrad of Montferrat, who fell in 1192 to a pair of young assassins posing as monks. He embraced them as holy men. He died with their daggers between his ribs. But among the shadows, there were hearts still beating.
Sea otters have a nightly ritual.
Layla al-Khorasani, raised within Alamut's inner sanctum, was both blade and bait, a deadly fusion of beauty and precision. She could poison a goblet in front of a man and make him thank her for the wine. She had killed a Mamluk commander in his own bed, then wept over his corpse as if mourning a lover. But she had never truly loved, not until Khalid, the son of a Damascus noble, whose passion for poetry and politics drew her in like a flame. Her orders were clear: kill him. He was a sympathizer to the Crusaders, a traitor to the faith, a threat. But Layla hesitated. Their nights became long and tender. She told herself it was just a tactic until it wasn't. When word reached Alamut that she had failed to act, she was summoned back. But instead of punishment, she was given a new mission: kill Khalid and prove her loyalty. This time she obeyed. She entered his quarters one final time, whispered a poem he had written into his ear, and slid her blade beneath his ribs. But what the order had not counted on was what she found hidden in his chambers: a map, a plan. Evidence that Khalid was not betraying Alamut, but uncovering a plot against it. The real traitor was someone inside. Someone close to Hassani Saba himself. And so the game shifted. Layla disappeared from the ranks, but she did not go far. She hunted in secret. She found the betrayer, Farid al-Nasir, a high-ranking assassin who had been feeding information to the Seljuks for gold and favor. He had orchestrated Khalid's execution to cover his tracks. Layla killed him slowly, not for Alamut, but for herself. For Khalid. For the truth that had been buried beneath
the greatest
lies.
Sieges in history weren't just battles.
Meanwhile, the world outside continued to burn. The Hashashin's most daring moment came when they infiltrated the court of Saladin himself, the great Muslim general who had united Egypt and Syria.
Twice they tried to kill him.
Once they left a dagger on his pillow with a note, "We are closer than your breath." Saladin increased his guard. He did not sleep the same for the rest of his life. Other women, too, rose within the ranks. Zara of Tyre, who famously seduced a Crusader bishop and assassinated him during Mass with a blade hidden in a holy relic. Or Saria, who posed as a concubine to a Byzantine general, only to slaughter him during a banquet. Her escape recorded in stunned Greek scrolls as a ghost that wore perfume. They were not just assassins. They were symbols. The Hashashin weren't an army. They were a message. A message that no man, no matter how powerful, could rule by fear alone. Because fear could bleed. Eventually, the Mongols came. Hulagu Khan brought fire and siege engines to the mountains. In 1256, Alamut fell, its libraries burned, its leaders executed. But the fire didn't end there. The Hashashin had planted seeds in every kingdom, every court, every creed. And even as their fortress turned to ash, their legacy took root. Layla was never seen again. Some say she died at Alamut's gates, blade in hand, eyes on the horizon. Others say she lived, passing her teachings on to a new generation, a hidden line of assassins in the deserts, the palaces, the shadows of every empire.
You ever wonder why humans look so different,
after.
but
Today,
are still
we use the word assassin
99.9% the same?
But the truth is buried deep in those mountains. In blood, in silence, in the echo of a dagger's whisper. Before the ninja, before the spy, before the agent in a suit with a silenced gun, there were the Hashashin. And they were never just killers. They were believers. They were lovers. They were legends. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. If you would like to see more, hit that subscribe button. Share to support the channel.
In the year 1095, the cry of war shook the foundations of Europe. At the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II summoned the faithful, urging them to take up the cross and reclaim the Holy Land. His voice thundered with divine fire. He promised remission of sins, eternal glory, and the chance to walk where Christ had walked. Across kingdoms and empires, lords, knights, and peasants alike answered the call. One of them was Elias of Rouen, a bastard knight with no inheritance.
The American Civil War wasn't just brother against brother.
He rode not for salvation,
it was
but for a name worth remembering. The crusade began not with banners, but with chaos. Peasant mobs marched first, ill-prepared and poorly led. They were slaughtered en masse by Turkish raiders before ever reaching Asia Minor. The real army followed, led by nobles like Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, and others who mistrusted one another more than the enemy. In Byzantium, tensions flared. Emperor Alexios demanded oaths of loyalty before granting aid. Bohemond, ever the schemer, swore allegiance with a smile he didn't mean.
In the shadows of Constantinople, Elias met Seraphine, a high-born Byzantine woman who defied protocol to tend to wounded crusaders.
Their first meeting was brief, but her intelligence and fire haunted him long after they rode east. The march across Anatolia was hell. Heat scorched the land. Water was scarce. Turkish horsemen struck from the hills and vanished like ghosts. In Dorylaeum, the Crusaders were ambushed by Kilij Arslan's forces. The vanguard was nearly destroyed. Elias fought alongside Bohemon's men in the heart of the chaos, blood-soaked and battered, saving a wounded child who clung to his leg amidst the screams. Reinforcements arrived just in time. Victory came at a cost. Hundreds lay dead beneath the sun. Their armor melted to their bones. Infighting poisoned the crusade from within. Bohemond seized supplies meant for the whole army, forcing others to beg or steal. Raymond of Toulouse accused him of betrayal. A council was called, but no justice followed.
Will one day become our...
Meanwhile, Elias discovered a secret. Baldwin of Boulogne, Godfrey's own brother, had abandoned his men and taken control of Edessa, carving out a personal kingdom. His betrayal would ripple across the crusade, a warning that the Holy War had become a game of thrones. The march to Antioch was marked by frost and starvation. When the Crusaders arrived, the city stood tall, defiant behind its towering walls. The siege began. Days turned into months. Food ran out. Men boiled leather for soup. One knight, mad from hunger, murdered his friend for a crust of bread. Within the camp, Isabel, Elias's sharp-witted sister disguised as a squire, uncovered a plot to sell secrets to the enemy. The traitor was a Flemish noble who had promised Antioch to the Fatimids in exchange for gold. Elias confronted him under torchlight, blade drawn. The traitor laughed, said, "You think this war is holy?" before Elias cut him down. His body burned in a pit, a warning to all. Hope faded. A priest claimed to find the Holy Lance beneath a church floor, guided by a vision from God. Bohemond saw an opportunity. He rallied the men with righteous fury, though some whispered he had planted the relic himself. With renewed zeal, the Crusaders stormed Antioch through a secret gate, bribed open by a local guard. The city fell in blood and fire. Streets ran red. Inside the chaos, Elias found Seraphine tending to both friend and foe. She had come alone against her father's wishes to serve those too broken to fight. Her courage seared itself into Elias's heart, a light in the darkness. But the siege was not over. Days later,
the Andromeda Galaxy is heading straight for us.
Now the Crusaders were the besieged, trapped inside the ruined city. Food ran dry again. Disease took more than the sword. Men abandoned hope. Bohemond refused to honor his oath to return Antioch to Byzantium. He declared himself prince of the city. Raymond opposed him, and the army split into factions. In secret, Bohemond offered Elias command of a battalion if he swore loyalty.
Elias declined. His loyalty was to the mission, not a man.
That night, someone set fire to the armory. Dozens burned. The traitor was never found. Inside a makeshift hospital, Layla, a captured Saracen healer, worked tirelessly to save the wounded. Isabel, recovering from a spear wound, grew close to her. Their bond formed in whispered words and stolen glances, in the quiet defiance of a war that wanted them enemies. When Layla was accused of poisoning the sick, a mob dragged her to the square. Isabel intervened, casting off her disguise and naming herself a noble of Rouen. Her authority held just long enough for Layla to escape, but not before Elias struck down one of the ringleaders. Their unity frayed, the Crusaders faced destruction from within, and yet they rallied. With the Holy Lance at the front and madness in their eyes, the Crusaders charged Kerboga's army. Against all odds, they broke the siege. The Muslim forces fractured and fled. Antioch was theirs, not by pity but by sheer brutality. The road to Jerusalem stretched long and broken. Along the way, the Crusaders retook towns they had once bypassed, including Ma'ara, where they butchered prisoners and, according to some, ate the flesh of their enemies in desperation. Elias did not partake. He wept for what they had become.
China's story is one of the oldest on Earth.
Outside the city of Acre, another
From ancient
ambush
dynasties
waited.
to modern
Muslim
empires,
cavalry shattered the Crusader scouts. 100 men was lost. Bohemond refused to send aid, hoping to weaken Raymond's forces. Elias led a daring midnight raid into the enemy camp, rescuing survivors and striking a blow that turned the tide. The attack left him bloodied and near death, but in his fever he dreamed of Seraphine's face and awoke screaming, more determined than ever. By the time they reached Jerusalem,